Hey, hello everyone. We've got to keep to time. We've been told that so people can jump between sessions and all that kind of thing. So let's get rolling. Thanks very much for coming into this session on high cadence Earth observation. People who know me know it's a bit of a pet subject of mine over the last few years. So how we can exploit this new avenue of Earth observation. As you can probably tell from my grey hairs, I began life back in the years of single Landsat images and magnetic tapes arriving to the post. So to have Earth observation systems that record and deliver data at frequencies less than a week, or down to days and even below, is a pretty exciting situation to be in, something I kind of look forward to for a long while. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go through and have a quick run of 4 presentations where we'll give some examples of high cadence Earth observation. We'll look at the uses, hopefully give some of the pros and cons, etc. And at the end, we'll have a discussion session. So if you have questions and then we don't get time to answer them, don't worry, we'll be having a discussion session at the end and we'll deal with them then. So right, to get things rolling, I'm really pleased to welcome Melina Guerra, from Planet Labs, who's going to Planet Labs, the company that sort of set the ball rolling really with this kind of high cadence Earth observation. And she's going to give us an overview of where they're at the moment and hopefully some of the directions they'll be going in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi. Hello. Figure this out first.
Try now.
There we go. All right. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to open the session, and thank you, Jeff, for the invitation, and thank all of you for being here. I want to begin by telling you a story. This is a story of an event that maybe you remember from about a year and a half ago, a massive landslide that occurred in India that ended up killing dozens of people and destroying 2 power plants. At the beginning, people thought, and it was reported in the media, that it was likely to have been a glacial collapse that triggered the flood. However, Planet happened to take 2 pictures within 27 minutes over the spot. And thanks to this data and further data later that was processed, we were able to identify that it was actually a landslide that had triggered the flood. And then we actually captured images of one of the power stations being destroyed. And these were those 2 images. The other thing that was really interesting was that within hours of these images being published in our archive, scientists on Twitter started communicating and talking about these imagery and talking to Planet to also request that SkySat, our high resolution satellite, take images over that area. And this is the high resolution SkySat image from the location. And you can see here, this was the rockfall site, and this was the tracking of the flood path that ended up being processed and analyzed. And less than 6 months, so that was in February, less than 6 months later in July, there was already a science paper published by that collaborative group of scientists that had started talking over Twitter. There was, of course, a lot of media around the event. And this is what one of my colleagues at Planet describes as science at the speed of the Anthropocene. It's science that is moving thanks to social media, and of course, thanks to technologies such as satellites capabilities. Our mission, in case you don't know Planet, is to image the whole world every day, making change visible, accessible, and actionable. And that story that I just told you, I think highlights those three variables, those 3 descriptors in a perfect way. And although he couldn't be here today, this is our co-founder, Will Marshall, that is going to tell you the story of how Planet came to be. So what Will was talking about is accomplished by way of two constellations, the Dove constellation that is constantly on and scanning the Earth, and then the high resolution SkySat constellation. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Our view is obviously to complement and make use of our data together with other publicly available data sets. We identified that there was a need for higher cadence, there was a need for higher resolution, and in the future, Planet is planning another two constellations, one that is higher resolution with a rapid revisit, and also expanding the range of the spectral bands with a hyperspectral mission. If you want to look at an example of what high cadence means to us, this is an example of the captures of Landsat imagery over a month. This is the revisit time of 5 days with Sentinel. And with PlanetScope, we have near daily. Of course, we have to remove days of cloud cover, but you can see the expansion of data, what becomes available by just having that Dove constantly on scanning the Earth every day. Different ways in which scientists have used this data. I'm going to tell you about two quick stories. One is scientists that were able to measure impacts of landslide triggered by an earthquake in Indonesia. This was an event that was also highly publicized in the media a few years ago. It was the province of Palu, and there was this earthquake that happened here of really high magnitude that triggered a tsunami that went into this bay. And from there, caused really big soil liquefaction events and landslides. It ended up killing 5,000 people. And I'm going to show you the imagery that these two pictures were highlighting. You can pay attention later. You're going to see the bridge, the beach, the river, and this area here, how it's destroyed. So these are two images taken over 3 or 4 days. And these images helped scientists quantify the seismic displacement of the region, and also identify that some of the practices, the farming practices in rice in the region had been the culprits or helped create the conditions in the soil that triggered these landslides. In other areas of the world, specifically the high latitudes, we have another feature because of the orbital mechanics of the way that the orbital geometries of the satellites, we get this overlap across multiple images, and we can get captures that are only overlapping, are only delayed by 90 seconds. And in areas like the Arctic, this is really important, and it can help you look at the river flow by measuring the displacement of ice chunks. And you can see these two locations that a scientist at the University of Oslo used in his paper to identify river flows with surface velocity, and then from there estimate discharge of the rivers. We at Planet love to stay in touch with scientists because they're constantly showing us new use cases and new things that we didn't even know were possible with our data. So we provide this education and research program to allow students and faculty that have an email associated with the university to just sign up for an account under the basic ENR, and then you can get free 5,000 square kilometers a month. And from those free accessible data, we have seen over 10,000 users and over 2,000 papers that have been published. We also provide or have been creating for the last few years an applications report so that this is freely available also on the website. So you can see by different areas of research, cryosphere, biosphere, geosphere, different papers and stories that have been utilizing our data. And then we also want to be in touch with you. So we create webinars, colloquia, conferences, we host conferences, we sponsor hackathons. We have our Science Wednesdays on Twitter. So there's multiple ways that we can keep in touch, and we want to keep in touch with the scientific community. And then we also have campus licenses across universities in the world, including Leicester, as Will mentioned, that just signed up for a long-term partnership with us. Just to set the stage and end up my presentation, Why high cadence? And this was a quote from a paper that I really enjoyed that says that basically all things are changing all the time. It's the nature of life and time. And if we really want to be able to make decisions based on all those changes that are happening on time, then we really need high cadence. And I think these 3 stories that I brought to you today show how we can better understand how the world is changing and better protect and take care of people and their livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got maybe got time for one quick question.
I spoke so fast.
Any quick? We can have a discussion session at the end, so we can deal with them. But
Your 5,000 square kilometers a month, can you chop it up, or does it have to be one image? And can I have 510 kilometers, or do I just have to have 5,000 square kilometers in one bit?
No, it doesn't have to be one bit. It can be different images.
okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, now moving on to more of a use case of this high cadence Earth observation. I'd like to welcome Betsa Della Vereda Batista from University of Nottingham, just to talk about a project that I'm involved with as well. So we're now going to hear about how we can use this high cadence information in a tactical monitoring example. Betsa, up to you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, my name is Betsa, and I'm going to talk about the tactical monitoring of pelagic sargassum influxes with high cadence Earth observation. So this one. Yeah, this is a project that it was funded by the UK Space Agency, and these are all the organizations that we were working together. So first, I'm going to start talking a bit of background of what is sargassum. So sargassum is a macroalgae that all its life cycle floats in the ocean. And there are mainly 3 species of that these 2 sargassum plutons and natans are the ones that we found in the Sea of Sargassum, and then Sargassum natans 8, which is now the dominant species in what I'm going to talk about later. So sargassum is an important part of ecosystems. It provides like an important habitat for wildlife in the oceans. It provides shelters, feeding grounds, and also migration pathways. So it is an important factor in the ocean, and also it protects some beaches when it's in normal quantities. I'm gonna talk just really fast about the Sargasso Sea. It's something that you might have heard about before, and this is the region where the Sargasso Sea goes, and it's predominantly with the 2 species that I've talked about. And every year, some of the sargassum passes to the Caribbean coast. However, there has been a bit of a shift, and there's now something called the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt, which what it has been found is like huge influxes of sargassum in the Caribbean that started in 2011. And these influxes, what it was discovered is that they were different species, and they were not coming from the typical Sargassum Sea, but they were coming from this area of the Atlantic, which is now called the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt. So the influxes of sargassum had been like increasing on time, and before it was thought that it was like an atypical event. However, the trend is going up, and every year now it's a normal to receive sargassum in the Caribbean in great amounts. These are some pictures of how it looks, the inundations of sargassum in the coast, and obviously it has huge impact in tourism in the Caribbean, where the main activity is tourism. Like the smell that it emits is really unpleasant, but also it has impacts on ecosystems and stuff. However, like new research and like they are trying to understand like if this quantity of sargassum could be actually an opportunity to use it and to produce new new things. So like there has been lots of research going on about biofuels, plastics, producing cosmetics and stuff. So it is important to monitor like the sargassum arrivals for two reasons: for mitigate like the impacts, but also like to provide tools to collect this sargassum on time and create new opportunities. So there are some existing monitoring tools. Most of them are offshore, and they are with really coarse spatial resolution. There's one from CIMAR in Lago Navio in Mexico, and there's other monitoring tools that are more citizen science based, which it's about like taking pictures and telling people where is the amount, where is the sargassum. There's other like that they are also offshore, and it's with using MODIS from the South Florida University, and in France they are doing with Sentinel-2. It's important to say that these are all like offshore because of the spatial resolution. So this problem needs like a sweet spot, the right resolution in the three domains: spatial, spectral, and temporal, so that we can actually monitor it well. So in this case, the planet superdoves are exactly the sweet spot. So why are these important? Because like still they are really very high resolution meters in less than 3 meters per pixel. You have a potential revisit of daily images, and you have extra bands that provides you more information in the visible, but also they allow you to discriminate better, but also like to compare with other systems like MODIS or Sentinel-3. And also another important feature is that you can create indices that are comparable with other systems. So this is an example of this is the sargassum, how the decay process is. So normally it arrives to the coast, it stays there, it starts decaying, and then it starts drying. So this decay process is quite important, for example, from the companies that are going to use the sargassum because they need it fresh. So you need to be able to separate, for example, the dry and the fresh sargassum. And in this plot, I'm showing here like how is the spectral signature of the dry and the fresh sargassum, and how is important the extra bands the superdoves provide. So as a prototype, in the first project, which was called SASAMS, we were trying to see how with the floatal algae index we could map the density of sargassum. So this is just a image like a normal map, area photography from Google Maps. This is Cancun Tulum in Mexico, and this is a superdove pulse color infrared image that is you can see here the patches of sargassum in the beach. And then you get the index, and you can get estimations about the density of sargassum in the area. So with that, the idea, like for this Sargassum project, what we try to do is to provide reliable, actionable, near real-time information for those industries that want to use the sargassum, and give them the information where is the sargassum. So it's a really simple system where it's web-based, and you just start monitoring, and what you have is just a simple dashboard that it will have like a really general information about the areas of interest that you want to get alerts from. And yes, as I said, it's a really simple and friendly system that the only thing that you need to do is to upload or digitize a area of interest, get a shape file, and with that, you just need to wait. You need to wait until the satellite pass, and then you will get an email that it will tell you what was in that new pass in your area of interest, where you will have information about the number of patches that you have of sargassum, the area that it covers, and which of these sargassum patches are significant, as in more than 100 square meters. So this is, then you can go back to the system, and then you can see it on the map, and you can see this is a map from the 1st of August of this year, and you can see how the patches of sargassum, this is the way that normally sargassum forms in lines in the ocean, and how this starts moving to the coast. And this is interesting how here it gets stopped in the coral barrier. And in here you can see also like a boom where the hotels put barriers so that they contain the sargassum and they don't enter to their beaches, because there's and all the sargassum that is coming to the beach. So this is an animation that comes from 3 days, and you can see how the sargassum is moving in these 3 days. And for now, the system is this, but with local knowledge and perhaps with another information, like, for example, wind direction, currents and stuff, you can more or less do your prediction about where is the sargassum moving. So what is this important is that we are providing actionable information that you will get an email, and you can decide with that email if you need to take an action, or if it is not important and you can wait for the next pass and then so just the conclusions. So this is really important because we are using this Earth observation high cadence for practical applications. It is really important for this case and for this solution, the sweet spot where the 3 domains, spatial, spectral, and temporal, get in the right place. And yeah, what I find really interesting of this is as well that, like, you don't need to be an expert to use this system. This is an application that it just provides that literally you just need to put an area of interest and get information about the sargassum. I think that's it for me.
We have probably got time for a couple of questions, just to keep us onto the right timetable. So, any questions from the audience?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, great. How are the products validated? Are you able to communicate that through your interface in terms of what's the end user, or to make even that communication potentially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, like, the validation part, as in we have tried the indices that we are using with like online on-site cameras, web cameras, and it's really good. But like, yeah, we don't have, because it's in beta state, we still don't have like that user and like feedback from the user to understand it.
Have you explored sort of interfacing with the crowdsourcing kind of platforms?
Yeah, so so some of these images that we found, we have like just cross validate with the cameras, with that citizen science products, and it seems like it's working. But yeah, we haven't got like still the real users like doing it. Yeah.
We're working with one company that is testing on how they would farm sargassum, but because it's so dynamic, they're sending us drone footage, and it's 15 minutes before the overpass or something, but the structure of the mat has changed, or it's broken up and stuff. So it's a very dynamic situation to do a validation. But in terms of amounts we're mapping and the amounts arriving, we're definitely in the right ballpark. Okay. Another quick one, or should we wait to the end of Sam?
What are they doing with regards to once they find on the beach?
So now, as in what they do is, so it's strange because some people, they are just like taking out, and that means like they take lots of sand as well, and they are like destroying the beaches and lots of biodiversity there. So another people is more like another group of hotels, for example, they are more careful and they separate sand, and they are trying to do the like restoration of dunes and stuff, so to make sure that they are not impacting. So that's why also like the barriers are something that they are doing, so that they don't have to kind of go with a huge machinery in the beaches. And they have like they are called sargasseros, which are like huge ships that they are, and they just kind of go like close to the barriers, and they just like collect all this. But like sometimes it's so much that it's not possible with these huge boats neither. So the idea is exactly to tell them, and also like because it's not organized yet, like you don't have like like logistics of, okay, we collect it and we give it to the people who actually is going to use. The disposition is still in regulation, and the deposition, as in like where to put the sargassum, it's still in regulation and stuff. So it's like, it's really diverse how people are approaching the problem. Like depending if you are a hotel, if you are just a natural protected agency, the governmental agencies and stuff. So the idea is, what they are asking is like, it would be really good that we can know in the sea before it approaches the coast, so that we can actually try to do it with boats and stuff.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. We can continue this discussion at the end. So we're going to stay in the coastal zone now, and now we have Paul Bell from National Oceanographic Centre, and we're going to do some the topography mapping, I think, or the bathymetry mapping.
Right, I'm going to redefine high cadence here. We're probably talking slightly different timescales here, but in terms of oceanography, high cadence of getting a new 3D map of the coastal zone in anything less than a year is that's fast. So this is some work my co-authors Clive Neal and Christine Sams we've been doing for about 3 years now. It's to do with intertidal mapping. Why do we care about intertidal mapping? And by intertidal, I mean the region of your beach between high and low water. More than a third of the world's population live in coastal areas. I'll skip the second one, but what's really surprised me was a recent paper that said those intertidal regions are declining, have declined by 16% between 1984 and 2016. So these are really, really important coastal regions that are important to the coastal economies for a whole range of reasons, including protecting the coast from flooding, and they are declining, and nobody's really got the capability of monitoring them yet, particularly over large areas. So this work dates back actually well over a decade. It originated with some work we were doing with marine radars at the National Oceanography Centre. So if this little beastie up here, a ship's radar with a rotating antenna. Beauty of this is that we can collect very, very high cadence information and get images every couple of seconds, and we can actually watch the tide going in and out. This animation here is a 4-kilometre radius section of the Dovey Estuary, which is near Liverpool, where we come from, and you're seeing the tide going in and out, or up and down on the beach over a couple of tides there. We're particularly well blessed in Liverpool with a very high tidal range of about 10 metres, so it's quite spectacular there. And the kind of information we get on the left here, this is a Lidar scan, which is flown from an aerial Lidar system. They probably took about a day to build that up at quite significant cost. With a couple of weeks of radar data, with the radar just sat there on the tower, we're able to build up quite a nice 3D map of the region, and actually get slightly better intertidal coverage, because the The aerial lidars are limited to when they're flying, which might not actually coincide with the low spring tides. So how does this work? Waterline methods for intertidal mapping are not a new idea. They date back to World War I, believe it or not, where a wily admiral was using aerial photographs, carefully timed aerial photographs of French and Belgian beaches, and mooring a submarine offshore to measure tidal height with a pressure sensor. So the underlying principle has been around for a century. What we're doing here is flipping it in the dimensions. So rather than looking at individual images and trying to draw a line where the water line is on the map, where we're associating that water line with the contour of at the elevation of the tide at that moment in time. If we look at a single pixel in a sequence of images and estimate what the wetting and drying would be for a given water elevation, and then we can scan through all the possible water elevations and essentially look for a coded pulse sequence, and the best one that matches should be the elevation of that particular pixel. And we do that over a whole array, basically over the whole image, and that pops a three-dimensional map of whatever you're looking at, provided it is intertidal. You could also do this in a lake if you've got lake levels that vary significantly or river levels that vary significantly, provided you have that water level record to go with it, because that water level record is our reference. This is one of the earlier examples we did. This is Morecambe Bay in the United Kingdom, sort of west coast of a little bit north of Liverpool. On the left, this is a Lidar scan. So again, you can probably just about see each of these little strips is one flight path of the aircraft going up and down. I don't know how many days it took to build this up, but I'm guessing there's probably getting towards a week of flight time there, which I dread to think what that cost the local authority to build up, but it's probably getting towards several £100,000. Using Sentinel-1 data, this is a year of Sentinel-1 imagery, actually a year later than the Lidar scan, and we get really a very good estimate. We're using, in this instance, the tide gauge data from Heysham, which is just about here, and assuming it's flat across that area, just to simplify matters. That's obviously a bit of a simplification, and that simplification does tend to fall apart higher up into the estuary. So if you consider that's probably getting on about 15 kilometres, the tidal curve actually distorts significantly the higher up you go into the estuary. So good tidal data is one of the key elements to this. We have to take what we can get. Ideally, we'd have a nice tidal model, but that's not always possible. What we find is that the absolute water levels are really very, very comparable. And in fact, there are certain advantages to this. What's nice to pick out in this, if you look on this 2017 Lidar scan, that little sandbank there, and then compare its position a year later on the SAR data, that sandbank has actually migrated almost, well, several kilometres further out to sea. And given that this is a working port, that's the sort of thing that really upsets port authorities and hydrographers, because not only is it a danger of grounding, but it can also substantially alter the currents in the area. And keeping track of things like that at the rate these things are changing is not an easy process. So this work has been supported by a number of different projects over the years. We tend to run hand to mouth on little snippets of funding. Got some of it from ESA. The next one is Blueco, which was an ESA funded project, which is just about coming to an end now. And we're gradually building things up to TRL levels and producing the case studies to go with it. An example of some of the outputs. This is Liverpool. So Liverpool city centre is over here on the right hand side, and Birkenhead over here. We have very large intertidal areas. There's a deep water shipping channel that runs up here called Queen's Channel, and there's a post-Panamax cargo dock over here on the outside of the estuary. These sandbanks are on the other side of the training wall, so that's the shipping channel there. These sandbanks sit on the other side of that shipping channel, constrained by a training wall. And these, we think, probably jiggle around a bit over the years in a cyclic fashion. One of the next things we'll probably do is actually animate several years of survey data, such as this derived from the Sentinel data, and actually watch how these sandbanks shift over that time and how they evolve. But those are the sandbanks in reality from about just under 20 years ago, and you can see that the general form is very similar, but the positions have probably shifted around a little bit. This is another example. This is the Dovey Estuary in West Wales. A nice little Google Maps image there. Lots of twiddly bits. It evolves, I think, quite rapidly. These channels meander around. Again, we've got the potential to monitor that, and that there are coastal communities in very low-lying areas dotted a lot around here to whom this sort of thing matters. This is our latest case study, which is part of the Blueco project. We've picked Portsmouth partly because it's actually very stable and doesn't move very much at all. This is an enclosed embayment. The sea is down here to the south, and that's the mouth of the estuary. So this is again a Lidar scan, and over on the right, this is the corresponding equivalent from our Sentinel-1 data using the temporal waterline method. And what's really nice is that we're getting mean absolute errors down to about 20 centimeters, which is really, really good. That's getting very, very useful. Another reason why you would care about getting intertidal maps of this sort of resolution, when we have 3D maps like this, the mean high water springs level and the mean low water springs level actually have legal definitions in land ownership and responsibility. So if we can actually tick those out of the data remotely, that has potentially a long-term implication for monitoring these things and assigning ownership and responsibility for all sorts of interesting things. Some people may not thank us for that. Another example, I said before that we were in Morecambe Bay, we were using just the local tide gauge as the reference. In some areas you can't do that, particularly when we're now expanding this method onto our servers. So the early work I was just running on a laptop. Now we've shifted everything across onto the servers, and we can do very, very large areas now. So this is some work we did in Bangladesh. We unfortunately don't have any ground truth, but the tidal, we've used spatially varying tidal data based on a model to assign different tidal characteristics to every pixel in the image. We get a much better fit that way, but in essence, we're picking out very, very nice and what I would consider very realistic looking intertidal areas. So it's just a shame we don't have any ground truth for that. I'll draw to a close now. So in summary, we've got this method. We're advancing it all the time. We can do very large areas. Just in terms of timescale, we can pick an area and probably produce an intertidal map within a day or two. Adapted from marine radar work, we can use anything from about 3 months of Sentinel-1 data up to about 12 months. The optimum is probably about between 6 and 12 months. Reference to the input tidal data, and the results compare very favourably with LiDAR surveys. And we have to bear in mind that the LiDAR surveys are an instantaneous snapshot. We would not expect a perfect match over a 6-month period from when, if you walk around the beach, you know that beach changed at that time. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Probably have got time for a couple of questions. All right, about them.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I've seen that you've got a number of partners that you should work with to develop this report. I wonder whether it's out there actually from the private sector, whether you have any plan to commercialize or productize this report.
The original marine radar work is already commercialised and is a commercial service available within the UK, which a number of coastal councils are now operating to monitor beach levels in front of sea fences. The slightly longer term plan, when we've produced sufficient case studies and shown our stakeholder group that this data can be trusted and compares in a stable fashion with LiDAR, then yes, we would hope to be able to roll this out on some kind of commercial basis, but we're not quite there yet. We want to make sure everything's correct before we let this loose on the community. So yes, in essence, it's coming.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. What's that?
I have had a look at, for example, the ICESat database, which is a laser scan, but the data is extremely sparse, and I haven't actually found anywhere that overlaps with the areas we're using. And of course, the ICESat being LiDAR is limited to non-cloud covered days, which in the UK are rather few and far between at times. But it would be nice if we could.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move on to our final presenter now, who is somewhere up there in the ether. So, Sybrand, I hope you can hear us. So now going to introduce Sybrand van Bijma, sorry, from Capella Space, who's going to talk to us about high cadence Earth observation, but this time from a microwave or a SAR point of view. So over to you. I think you should have control.
Yep. Hello. Let me check. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, let's start with that. I hope everybody can hear me in the room. I apologize for not making it to the UK. I'm stuck here on the mainland with a lot of sickness in the family, so I thought it would be wiser if I would stay here. Yeah, well, it's a pity because I actually got my PhD in Leicester about 10 years ago. I followed the program there with Heiko Balster at the university. So I really would have liked to come back to Leicester to say hi to everybody again. But yeah, that's how things go. So yeah, name is Sybrand van Bijma. I'm working as a sales engineer for Capella Space. Capella Space is an American small-sat SAR company. So we build small SAR satellites, have them launched, and then we collect as much data as we do as possible with this. So the main office is based in San Francisco. So I think that's the next slide as well. Yeah, that's a nice SAR image over San Francisco. Yeah, why SAR? Yeah, it's been mentioned already by some others in this session. Clouds is a major reason. So yeah, with our X-band SAR system, we can image pretty much day and night, any weather conditions. So that's one of the major advantages of SAR. So what kind of systems do we have? Well, we have a fairly, compared to some of the bigger ones, Sentinel-1, the TerraSARs, a fairly simple system. It's an X-band SAR system with a single pole polarization, HH or VV. Yeah, you can choose whichever you want, and we collect it by literally tilting the satellite 90 degrees in space to collect VV. But we have a very high imaging bandwidth up to 500 megahertz, which corresponds to a slant range resolution of about 30 centimeters. So we can collect very high resolution data, and it's a very agile system. So we can collect data in ascending, descending orbits, left or right looking. We're not, we don't have a preference on our satellites, which direction we're looking. And we have imaging modes. Actually, one of them fell away for some strange reason. Oh, no, it's actually in two lines. So we have 3 imaging modes: spotlight, sliding spotlight, and strip map. The spotlight is our highest resolution product. It has a 0.5 meter ground resolution, so it's a very high quality product. Also, we use a multi-looking to collect it. So there's the dwell time of our satellites is about 30 seconds over a specific spot. And in that time, we take about 9 looks, which are combined to a very crisp, low noise, high quality image. So yeah, we have 3 corresponding products: a spot, sight, and strip product. Strip is our lowest quality product, but still have a ground resolution of 1.2 meters. So we're really talking very high resolution SAR here, unlike Sentinel-1, for example. So yeah, oh no, I can actually do it with the arrows. Great. So yeah, what do we have in space? We have an interesting constellation, I would say. At the moment, we have Capella 2 up to Capella 8 up in space. They're launched, they're operational, they're all doing great. The interesting thing is that not all our satellites are launched in an sun-synchronous or a polar orbit. So we have Capella 2 in a 45 degrees inclined orbit and Capella 6, which is in a 53 inclined orbit, combined with the others in a polar orbit. By combining these different orbits, we can improve the revisit on the lower latitudes quite dramatically. As you might know, polar orbits are great on the poles for revisit, but much less, yeah, you have much lower revisits on the lower latitudes because they don't pass over that often. So that combination gives us a really nice revisit, which I will highlight later. We have 2 more planned launches for the rest of this year. Capella 9 and 10 are launched in the Q4, the last quarter of the year. And then we are already building a number of new satellites for next generation with improved capabilities, technical capabilities, even quicker image collection, downlink, and so on. So really, Capella is really focusing on getting the data, as much data as quickly as possible, up and down, making sure that we are very responsive and that we can collect the data as quick as possible. So a little bit about where we stand now when it comes to revisit. So I've heard stories about once a month. That's great. We already have multiple overpasses per day for our satellites that we can do. Well, for a standard look angles, there's our optimized look angle range 25 to 40 degrees. We have an average revisit now of 5 hours. If we open up the look angle range, we can even bring that down to 2.5 hours. So we've been using look angles between 5 and 45 degrees. So that's already a lot of overpasses every single day. So how does this plot up? If you plot this on a world map, here you can see this is for the extended look angle, so a bit of the not the optimal range, but look angle range, but still a very good range. You can see that we have now a revisit at the poles of 2 to 3 hours, and then the lower latitudes of 5-6 hours every day. So let's say 4 overpasses per day on lower latitudes. And that's where we stand now, and that's what we would like to improve as well. So on the long term, this is a bit of marketing talk, I would say, but we would like to go to 1 hour revisit times and be able to collect thousands of images per day. Interesting here as well, we would like to offer also INSAR the capabilities. We are not there yet. The current generation of satellites is basically not technically advanced enough to provide reliable interferometric SAR repeat pass orbits, I would say. But we would like to be able to offer this also multi times per day revisit there. I mean, this is really a long-term goals of us. So how does it show at the moment this very day over Leicester? So I did a bit of an analysis. At the moment today over Leicester, we can expect 6 overpasses of of any of our satellites. And as you can see on the little list here on the left, every few hours, every 5-6 hours, we have an overpass of one of our satellites. And also in the middle, the plotted potential footprints of, it's a fairly small footprint that we collect. It's 5 by 20 kilometers in this example. But you can see that the different orbits give you a different orientation of the footprint. So you can see that the inclined orbits, they are more east-west oriented, or I would say southwest, northeast, northeast, northwest, southeast. And the polar orbits more north to south. So this is also something that can be used, quite useful for specific purposes. I mean, the line of sight, the orientation in which you look at a specific phenomenon or an area can really tell you, can give you quite a different view of the area of interest. So that's also an added, I would say, an added benefit of using these different orbits there. So yeah, if you look a bit wider, I hope this comes up nicely, but this is a very low resolution outline of the UK and Ireland. So I looked a bit, yeah, what imaging opportunities can we expect over this entire region? So we have about, how many are there? 12, 15 overpasses in total in this region. And some regions you can see that, yeah, we have a very high density of overpasses. It depends a bit on the day. As our orbits are not completely fixed at the moment, it drifts a bit. So some days you might have like 10 overpasses over Leicester, for example. Some days you might have 4. So it's always a bit of a hit and miss. But you can see that, yeah, we can already provide a lot of revisits there. So that's where we stand with our constellation. Then we also have been thinking, like, how can we make sure that the users can access this data as quickly as possible? So for that, we developed our console, an API, our tasking system, which basically the user can sit behind the computer, log in onto our console, or if they're a bit more advanced users, use our API to communicate with the console. They can uplink a certain task, like I want an image over Leicester tomorrow with this imaging mode and so on. Then this is taken up by our Capella ground control. Every 15 minutes, ground control checks whether there's any new tasks submitted. If so, and the ground control says, okay, we have capacity, we can do this within a day, the task is immediately uplinked to the satellite. The image is taken, the data is downlinked, and then processed in AWS government cloud, and it's processed and stored, and the product is immediately delivered by the user. And this loop is set up to be completely optimized, no need for a human in the loop. So it's really quick, confidential, and yeah, quite robust. So to communicate with the satellite, we use capacity of KSAT and AWS on different like 15, 16 locations around the world. So we can communicate with the satellites very quickly, very easily. So a little real life example of what we can do, how quickly we can turn this around. It's a bit, I hope it comes up okay, but yeah, I mean, the most interesting box is this text box on the bottom left, where you can see the timeline for a task. So the task was submitted through the console, and within 10 minutes, user got a notification, your task is accepted. And within half an hour, 32 minutes later, the task was scheduled on the satellite. And about an hour after that, the collect was acquired, and the user got the data delivered less than 4 hours after they submitted the task. So that's what's capable at the moment. I mean, if you can imagine, there are some applications where even more shorter latency is required. We're also developing now a direct access system. So during the collect or straight after the collect, it's downlinked in the straight away to the ground. But that's something we're developing at the moment. But this is what we can do using the current system with AWS KSAT ground systems.
So Brand, that's a couple of minutes to go now.
Okay, yeah, I'm not that far. A little bit, as I mentioned, we have the Capella Console, the web browser where you can use search the archive, use the submit tasks. And you can get real-time status updates every 15 minutes. The system will check whether it works, whether the task can be accepted or not. Yeah, and what I also mentioned, we have this API that we can use also, in which you can use all the functionalities also by through the API, more advanced, using Jupyter notebooks, for example, to interact with it. So that's the way it works at the moment. I completely forgot to put a last slide in with my contact details and what we can do, but I'd like to mention that, would you be interested to know more about Capella Space, go to the website. We have a very nice open data program as well, so users can sign up for our website and then access the open data, where we have about 100 free sample data sets, and that users can download for free and analyze as well. So with that, I would like to finish off. So I hope there's any questions.
Great, brilliant, thank you. And we probably have got time for a question directly to you, Cybran, but we're going to have a discussion anyway. But is there any quick questions specifically for Cybran? Yeah, over there, you'll have to shout maybe.
Yeah, is there any plans to use higher wavelengths or longer wavelengths on any new systems?
Yeah, I understand. Is there an idea that longer wavelengths? You mean for the SAR system? So like C band, L band?
L band.
Yeah. Not so much, because technically the thing is, yeah, Capella is set up as a small set company. L band requires a lot more big, expensive, heavy equipment on the satellite. So we are discussing maybe C band to start with, because that's a bit easier. But L band is really quite a step further. So that's not really on our roadmap to develop that, unfortunately. I would love to more personally, but yeah, it's just the way it is.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for that. So we've now got this discussion session, but before we start, I'd just like to make a request to Simon, if he doesn't mind. So Simon Pratt was going to present, but then he wasn't able to present his material today. But I'm really interested in the sort of work he's doing with really high cadence geostationary satellites. And this morning he was telling me about the Meteosat third generation satellites going up. And if you could just outline that briefly and some of the sort of advantages that we'll get from having that kind of capability. Thanks.
I'll come to the front so you don't have to look
brilliant.
backwards. Yeah, so I'm sorry I couldn't present what I was originally supposed to present today, but unfortunately there were a lot of complications with that. So I thought I'd at least come along and join in the discussion. So most of what you've seen in these presentations have been really high spatial resolution data that's at what I would consider quite a low temporal resolution. So we're talking every day, or in the case of Capella, every few hours. What I'm used to is every few minutes. So from these geostationary weather satellites, we get data for the whole Earth every 10 or 15 minutes, and for some subregions every 5 minutes, or even in some cases every 30 seconds. Of course, the spatial resolution is not what you're used to. We're talking at best around 500 meters. But the next generation of satellites is going to go beyond that, even down to maybe 50 meters if we're lucky, but more likely around 100 meters. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and it's, depending on your purpose, it can be quite a useful thing. I mean, I work with weather, so you can watch weather systems develop. But one of the good things is that Capella, we're talking about cloud cover, and SAR can see through cloud. But if you need visible data or infrared data, if you have these high temporal resolution geostationary sensors, because they're looking at the same areas of the Earth all the time, you have a higher chance of getting a snapshot without cloud cover. So from that perspective, it's quite useful, as a lot of the sensors, Planet and Sentinel, things like that. The rover pass time is around the same every day, and that can lead to problems if that area typically has cloud at that time of day. So it's a bit different from the other things that we've talked about, but if any of you are interested in that kind of data, come and see me and we can have a chat about it, and also during the discussion just now. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Simon. So I think, especially what Simon said at the end there, I think what we've seen through those presentations, that as I said, when I began, we used Earth observation to tell us what had happened, but I think now we're starting to see what is happening. And from what Will said in his video clip there about trying to take action, and what we saw with the Sargassing work as well, that we can then be very tactical about what we're doing and supply information to people that will then control their activities, their responses on that day, etc. So I think this is a super exciting area that we're working on, and I think it's something really positive to present Earth observation in this way, because it can show how we can have a real and immediate impact on a lot of people's lives, world around us, etc. So on that note, I'm going to open it up to any more questions from the audience on any of the presentations, or does anyone have a comment they want to raise about high cadence Earth observation in general? Okay. That must be one. So I was going to, if there are any questions, I was going to say, is there a poll? Could you do a kind of poll on Are people using high cadence Earth observation at the moment, or are you looking to use it? So put your hands up if you're already using the high cadence Earth observation. Okay, that's quite a small number. Do people see where they might be able to use that in their applications moving forwards after seeing the? So someone who didn't put your hand up, just, is there anyone here who thinks there's an opportunity for them to use this sort of information? Okay, yeah, a couple of hands, 3, yeah, brilliant. And in that case, so what is the constraint at the moment then? What is the thing that's sort of holding you back?
So I work in industry, it's about money. It's how much it costs to acquire the data country. At least break even on the money after service provider. So about getting enough data by clients, I think 30 plus. Appreciate there's a cost to it, that's understandable. It's
So I guess that's a question to the data suppliers then. What's the value of that data? Or I suppose it depends on the application. But do you feel you have the technology or skill sets in-house to deal with it? Or
I think so, yeah.
Anyone else who's potentially going to use it? Christina?
Just acquiring data itself and having the conversation with the company and trying to get the data is a problem itself.
Yeah. Okay, so there you go. So, Brand, did you hear that?
No, not completely.
No, they were saying that well, there was an issue of the sort of understanding the cost sort of ratio to what the data they obtain, especially when they have to acquire multiple images for an application. But also we had a comment that it's starting discussions with companies and understanding the access arrangements, etc., to exploit high cadence data.
Okay.
Forgot the comment here. Yeah.
Often sometimes the systems are in place, but payment mechanisms, for instance, are just terrible. For instance, I order a lot of Maxar imagery, and I can probably get it within a few hours of when they sent it. But it actually takes me 3 days to get the payment through, and they won't take it until I pay them in the first place.
Yeah.
So sometimes those payment mechanisms just aren't there. It's just seems to be a problem on that scale. So I think that needs to be rethought of in some cases.
Any more? I mean, oh, sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so Keith totally under DEFRA Earth Observation Policy League. So we use high cadence data, but within a service that we procure, particularly around kind of fishing and monitoring fishing vessels. And I think for us, the barrier is we're very much focused on both operational efficiency and providing analysis for policy. But in the operational aspect, it's about people coming to us with services that already exist and seeing high cadence data in services where actually for the environment, and particularly interesting in the first two, where these were kind of rapidly occurring environmental situations, and find that kind of situational awareness to actually have systems ready or use cases, or use cases where systems are ready to deploy, rather than having some of our research scientists within our agencies kind of developing those and actually spending time developing rather than meeting the policy needs.
Yeah. So an idea of the heavy lifting happening at the closer to the data than to the user. So that kind of compressing these big time series or something into actionable information.
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. Any more comments? Yeah, one more back there.
Yeah, so on this data now, we're getting great, and it's not a bad thing, but kind of the way we kind of store it, process it, analyze it, that's a big cost. Using power, kind of that kind of environmental side of things. So what's the prospect going forward? Because then you get a big problem, right? So just what's the end goal? It's a kind of ideas for that.
I mean, has anyone considered using what we'd call sort of intermediate products or analytics layers? So things like within Copernicus, you've got things like the soil sealing layer where a lot of information has been compressed into an environmental variable. Then, yeah, you know, you're sort of buying a semi-processed piece of information. Then is that something that people would be interested in rather than a huge data volume that then you have to do the compression yourself? I often make the analogy of like the kind of flour mills and cakes and bread and stuff. But, you know, if one organization is dealing with the flour milling, you know, everyone doesn't have to get their own corn, mill it, and then, but they can all make different cakes from it, you know, so it could be donuts or this cookies.
You said it.
I should have copied it. But yeah, I mean, is that a sort of model that people would be interested in? I know obviously we're an Earth observation community, and I'm probably the worst for it, where I want to see the imagery and I want to play with it myself. But when you consider an operational, sustainable solution, you know, as much as I love images, I don't want to spend my whole day just cranking through them. So, can we have a show of hands? Does anyone see that as an interesting? Yeah, that's good. Melanie?
Yeah, I would add to your comment. And what's your name, sorry?
Kate.
Yeah, I would add to your comment as well. So I'm originally from a developing country. I'm from Costa Rica, and if capacity is an issue in countries and skills is an issue here, imagine in a developing small country, right? So I think something that is more developed and more, you know, delivered to policymakers and decision makers in a more polished way is something that my region is definitely lacking. We don't have that many people that know or even have the budget for accessing raw data. So I would support what you're saying.
And the back there?
I'm Luca Burello and I'm from Innovate UK, KTN, and I'm their geospatial lead. And I've done some analysis. Yesterday we did a session, I was chairing a session on the business of Earth observation, and we had a similar type of conversation like this one, but instead of having a panel, we just came up with some two pens of information, of knowledge. One of the things that came out from the session was that in the curve of adoption of Earth observation, we are somewhere like still in developing a technology-driven innovation. We think about the sensor, we think about the data, we send, and then we don't think about what we're going to do with that data. Still developing pilots, demonstrator, case studies. We are not in a mature business development of the sector. We cannot call ourselves an industry yet. We are getting there, but we need to start moving away from the pilot and demonstrator phase. In order to do that, we need to start thinking from the end user perspective. Why do I need the data? Why not collecting the data? That is redundant. We need to understand what is my pain point, what is my problem, what I'm trying to resolve, and then go to the data to resolve and productize that data to something that is useful. So we need to start thinking from the end and then bring the data to a solution. And only if we do that, we can develop something like you were just asking. So a product that is repeatable, it can be scaled commercially, can be used, and it's not just a consultancy type of work.
Yeah.
Depends of knowledge. Yeah.
No, that's fine. And I think in some ways that's the way some of this sector has to move in order to be adopted, because it's like you said, the resources you would have to put in place in order to do that processing in-house would be, you know, it's going to be restrictive, and we're only going to get more and more of this data. So yeah, that's a very good point. Any more comments? Yeah.
Yeah, just a point on the resources thing. I mean, aside from the sort of resources at the end user point of view, I suppose what's interesting is also to think back to that very first case study that you gave on from the planet perspective. How much data have been collected in order to be able to capture that one event, and what's the what's the environmental cost of storing and distributing all of that data through, for example, really big data centers, which are very energy hungry and water hungry. And when we see this kind of proliferation of Earth observation missions, you know, constellations that are producing data of the Earth every single day, what's the long-term prospect for sort of ensuring sustainability at that end of the process? Are the data providers thinking about that, and how are data being archived and maybe deleted?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, you have does Brian have a position on that?
Well, I'm reminded of the talk the first day by Richard Ambrosi, the director of Space Park Leicester, who spoke about the space sustainability initiative. And Planet has been talking to them about the parts. We're definitely interested in the whole value chain and how sustainability can be, because a lot of people think of debris or rocket fuel, but what you're saying exactly is sort of the things where we need standards and we need incentives for industry to hear the voices of users, and that is a concern that insurance and finance are willing to support. So yeah, so we're working on that. We're working on being sustainable there.
Right.
Cybrand, as another data provider in the room, is your organization company thinking about how you make your archives and data distribution more sustainable, given that they're only going to get bigger over time?
Yeah, that's a very good issue. I actually didn't really think about it myself yet. Yeah, I mean, we've been in the actively acquiring data for only less than 2 years now, so our archives are not that big, but yeah, we would like to grow them quickly. But no, it's definitely something we will have to address at some point. That's actually a good point. It hasn't been discussed that much internally. I mean, we still see ourselves as a small company, but yeah, can grow quickly, as you can see. Yeah.
Very interestingly, over coffee, I was talking to Mark Drinkwater, who did the keynote this morning from ESA, and you see that huge fleet of satellites, the Earth Explorers and the Sentinels growing, and it's a real achievement when we have those dials that move around and show how many petabytes or whatever we're getting up to now, next order of magnitude being produced. And I think it's something that we have to consider, both in terms of the sort of environmental sustainability, but also making that data accessible to use it. So, you know, we may be dealing with multiple images per day or an image every day, etc. But then when those archives start going back, you know, decades, it'll be a wonderful resource. But then how do we make sure it is accessible and can be used, and then, you know, it becomes an effective resource rather than somewhat of a white elephant that is then just, you know, maybe stored away on tape storage somewhere. That do we still have tape storage? Whatever these data centers do. So yeah, visualize everything in terms of exabytes, if anyone remembers what those are. So we've got a few minutes left. Do we have any more? Remco's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe in line with what you were saying, and in the context of high cadence Earth observation, we see that companies like EarthEye and Satellogic are now experimenting with video images, moving images from space. That will, of course, even explode this data further. But how are these experiments regarded in the area of high cadence Earth observation?
So video measurements. Anyone in the room want to comment?
We could use that.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, yeah, because I was going to say, you know, waves and things that are, you know, moving at the right sort of cadence, you know, the right sort of pitch in order to be detected. I mean, I think in some ways it's almost a little bit of a not a novel. I don't want to say it's a novelty, but I mean, it's really nice to see aeroplanes move down runways and stuff. But then in the longer term, how can you see what would be the operational use of that when, you know, there's aircraft or, you know, they're all monitored anyway.
And versus the enormous amount of data that you then produce.
Yeah. So, but interesting, because the Planet SkySats, they had video capability. The first ones did, the Terabella one.
I think they still have. It's an extremely expensive service, so it doesn't get used too often. but I've only seen videos. I've seen a few videos of one of the rockets that was carrying one of our Dove constellations, like a fleet, and seeing the launch from one of our own satellites. So, but yeah, it doesn't get used very often.
No, it's because it's like an exciting technology. But the next step is how, like you were saying over there, you know, it's great technology, but what are we going to use it for? And is the value there against environmental sustainability?
I suppose at the moment that's the value only in the intelligence community.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but yeah,
I would say for the cost that would be to run it, might be difficult to access it in other industry.
we may not be the right audience for that sort of. So I mean, I think we're getting close to the end now, are we? I've still got about 10 minutes if you want to hang around, but I mean, I just had one final closing question, and I will for an answer myself. And kind of what is missing then from the high cadence sort of Earth observation offering? Is there something that people think should be done? Well, Remco's mentioned videos, but is there something that's missing in terms of spatial temporal resolution, etc.? Oh, we have two questions there. First one here, and then John. Yeah.
Well, I think interoperability is actually critical. You know, there's loads of science-grade data, and you know that's free, that's available. We've been validated and so on. And you know, you've got these things which are there. They give you the kind of information, but they don't exist on their own. There should be a clear way to put everything together and you know use the best of each.
Mm-hmm.
So interoperation between even between different spectral domains, if you want, is an important part of that.
Yeah. Anyone want to follow up to that one? I mean, I know there's things like some of the like the COG activities and spatial temporal asset catalog where people are trying to get data into a format that it can be then exploited. But I don't know how close that is to interoperability.
I think you know common calibration standards and things like truths are a really important step on that.
Yeah,
on that direction. But you know, it's nobody's forced to do it, and and there's you know, someone starts ranting about it. So
there's more value we could get out of these things if they were more fully interoperable. Yeah, yeah. John.
So just to mention an alternative, I'm John Cooper from the Environment Agency, and one of our functions is to manage flooding events, which can be quite serious. And we rely on radar satellites, which give us very good flood outlines, and we invoke the International Disaster Charter that most companies have signed up to. So that's a great help, but it's really quite difficult to use low Earth orbit. We've heard about the geostationary meteorological satellites in low Earth orbit. So for us to get the data, we've got to guess where the flood will be. We've got to order the imagery. We've got to wait for it to be acquired and downloaded. And you know, during real time, when you're managing a flood and you've got lots of people on the ground, there's lots going on to organise, and the information is really, really valuable. Just like to mention, almost advertised, there's an Innovate UK competition, which is open at the moment for the development of high altitude platform systems. So there are some aircraft and balloons sort of already in existence, but it's being funded by the Ministry of Defence, but it's cross-sector, so it's civilian applications as well. So we're interested to watch that new technology, because to have a geostationary platform in the stratosphere with a radar device on it, and the radars are small enough now to go on something like a Zephyr platform. I mean, it would be a real game changer for us in terms of that geostationary platform which LEO satellites offer at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's some sub-community that we need to invite to the next meeting to find out what's happening about that. I guess it's probably not, well, it's getting there, but you know, maybe next year.
Yeah.
They have someone from there. But I almost wondered if I'd planted you in the audience there. The comment I was going to have was, but the thing you said to me, what I think is missing from it is, and it's almost no fault of the data suppliers, it's the level of latency between the acquisition and the and then the availability of the data, and it's to do with processing pipelines. And you know, I'm sure if you paid more, you would things would get better. But that's something we found with our Sargassing work, was that you know, we kind of seen yesterday's you know, I did make the case that we're seeing what's happening rather than what has happened, but you know, it's what's happened yesterday that we see. So I mean, the request I would make is just to sort of, I know it can't get down to 0, but you know, work on reducing that latency so that the imagery is then available as soon as possible for the applications. If you're dealing with something that's tactical, like Simon, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were talking about latency there, for all the weather satellite data I work with, the latency is about 30 seconds from the satellite taking the picture to having the data on the ground, and then maybe another minute to transferring that to the user. So in total, we're talking 1 or 2 minutes from the satellite to the user.
Is that the kind of general public user, or do you have to be someone who's already
so
in the system?
You need a satellite dish to receive the data itself. I thought you can do it via the internet now, but that's a little bit slower. But it's not just Met agencies or the government. It can just be me and my university, for example. So it can be done. It requires a lot of infrastructure to do it, which perhaps only places like EUMETSAT and the other geostationary satellite operators have at the moment. But it's definitely not impossible to have much better latency.
Okay, so that would be what on my wish list. Any more comments? Oh, Pete?
I'll give you an interesting case study of a project I'm working on with the Canadian Space Agency and the US government. They're really worried about the North Atlantic right whale because there are only about 180 of these, and they're being hit by ships to rate about 10 a year. Which isn't good. Basically, they think they're going to wipe them out. So they've invested a lot of money, and their plan is to use satellites, VHR satellites, and do CNNs and AI on the imagery to detect whales, and then beam it into ships' bridges to redirect ships around them if they find them. There's a big Canadian Space Agency plan to do this at the moment because there's problems with all of it, but it's an interesting case study of high cadence and in that sort of thing. If you can change shipping lanes on an almost real-time basis within hours of minutes, if possible. But theoretically, you know, that is, if you haven't got a cloud, so it's possible to do. But they need to sort it out quite quickly.
Yeah, well, that seems like a case study or application that push things to the limit of the, you know, the delivery then.
It's thrown about $20 million it's so far in the last 2 years, but I think they need a lot more.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, if we've got no more comments or questions, I'd just like to thank everybody for being here for this session. It's been super interesting, and I'm, you know, I think definitely an excuse for having another one next year or any other conferences where I can persuade to let me organise one. But brilliant, it's great that people are interested in this area of activity, and thanks for the data suppliers for being here and explaining what's happening next and stuff and what's available. And I hope next time we'll have more use cases and we can talk more about pros and cons and maybe push the data suppliers a bit harder on what these things we want out of them. So that's great. So I thank all the presenters, but also thank yourselves as well for being here and contributing to this session. Thank you.